Well, hello. Today on the episode of the Ravens Chronicle, we're talking about faith. Why are we talking about faith? Well, I mean, if you look at across the country, if you look at across the world right now, faith differ, culture differ, and so on and so forth. Let's touch on a subject that is sometimes touchy, and let's see where we goes with this. Jason has no idea yet of what we're going to talk, so tune in. It's going to be interesting. Like, subscribe, thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever you want. Comment on it. We will be involved in a conversation with you guys. We want to hear what you want to hear, and we want to hear what you would like to push forward, and so on and so forth. So stay tuned. The intro is going to come up, and then the conversation is on. We'll talk about that.
All right, we're going to talk about it then. Hey,
All right.
welcome back to the Raven Chronicles with Muninn and Huginn. I
Hola.
guess we're winging it tonight because we've had a little bit of a technical issue with our guest. So roll with the punches, John. What are we doing tonight?
So, and this is something I brought up to you, I think, last Sunday.
Yeah,
I attended church, and I didn't go to church for. I mean, as a person, I go once a year for Christmas time. It's just kind of cultural tradition that we had at home.
yep.
But it was a very Catholic, uh, Latin, whatever church that we used to go to. I was invited to go to a Christian church last Sunday, and when I came out of it, there was some weight to it and some relief. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I messaged you, and I'm like, we should get a pastor or a priest, one or the other, and touch base and have them on our podcast. And the reason why I was thinking about this is after the things we see, right? That is crisis, which is one thing, but there's evil people. I truly believe that there's good and bad people, and there's some people who are in the middle, right? Who
Yep.
will do bad things or will do good things, or search, or they're in quest of themselves, which is totally fine. Um, so from what I've witnessed in the community of the policing aspect or the military, is fate is either there or not there at all,
Yeah.
right? Is a very one a black or white aspect. And let's include to this the the correctional officer. Let's include first responder in general, because they are in um they're in the same bucket, right? For the military, obviously, is whatever you learn about the intelligence you gather, and then going overseas and seeing awful things. And but I I'm you were asking me just before, well, when I press record, you were like, "Are you
Yep.
religious?" I
Yeah.
was raised in a family, and I mean, I think we need to say it, but let's go with the family first. My parents got me baptized, and I got all the crappy things that comes with it, communion and so on, in Quebec, where they put me in a school where I had to sing to church every Sunday until I was in grade, should be grade 7 or 8, give or take, and so on and so forth. Did I believe? Well, I don't think we had a choice, right? There were still the religion courses in school, and I mean, our teacher for music was what we call monseigneur, so which is the level after priest, right?
Yep.
Um, and this man was in quest of having a perfect day all his life. He was um he was seeking for the perfect day, or in his action, right? He cannot control others, but he can control what comes to him and goes out of him. So
Yep.
that was kind of the very rigid wall that I sat in, for my youth, right, and teenager years. And then my parents were not necessarily practicing, and that comes based on culture in Quebec. I believe that from the 50s, well, I mean, up to the 70s in Quebec, the religion was extremely present. If you look at, even in politics and so on, the families were humongous families. We're talking about like 12, 13, 14 kids per family,
Yeah.
an
That's
average.
pretty big.
That's pretty big. Yeah, my,
Yeah.
my my dad's side, there are 13 kids.
Yep.
I'll put it that way. So 13 kids, and made 42 grandchild. And 3 years ago, when last time I saw my mommy, she said that she had at that time 39 great grandchild
Wow,
children.
that's
Sorry.
impressive, eh?
Yeah. So it makes a big family. And don't get me wrong, I don't know all of them, right? Because we're
Yep.
kind of spread out a bit everywhere. But um, But
So
yeah,
was this Catholic, John, in Quebec?
yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Okay.
the Catholic. Yeah. So because of that pressure, there was a rebellion that
Mm-hmm.
came into Quebec against church, and to the point that church are for sale a bit right, left, and center in Quebec. Even in the 2000s, there was a cathedral in Montreal that was sold for $1 because the tax amount was so high to pay. So it was more than $1, obviously, and they made a club in it, which was, it is what it is. It
Yeah.
didn't last long because the image, right, that the church had from having a club running in the cathedral, and it's the old cathedral, right? It's a whole whatever architecture and so on. It's
Yeah.
beautiful, and the noise, right? The noise in a church in general, the old church, it's fantastic. So imagine
Oh
like
yeah, it's
having
beautiful.
revs or club music. I mean, think about like Slim Shady reading in it, or 50 Cents back in the 2000s.
Just
Um,
breaking the stained glass as they
yep.
rap away or whatever they do.
Yeah, or whatever the David Guetta or whatever that is, right? Um, so there's been that rebellion, right, which affected the entire kind of way. But on the same way, the other reason why I wanted to talk about it, and it's Canadian base here when we talk about that, is that what we found, we talked about it a bit before, is the faith is kind of gone, and I'm not saying about I'm not talking about other religion. I'm really pointing out, a Catholic, Christian, and so on.
Yeah.
Churches, and I'm surprised. The English side of the country is way more practicing, practicing. I think that's how you call it, than the French side.
Yeah.
But still, it's not as what it used to be. And what
Yeah.
we're seeing as well in the news is other people coming with their religion into our country, which is totally fine, and they're pushing to have their values in. And then you have people who don't care and people who cares, which bring conflicts because it seems that nowadays people cannot have communication in between two different perspective.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a big mix of all of this that I wanted to chat about. And the other aspect I'm going to bring you here, and this is something that I heard when I was there this weekend, and it kind of got to me, not negative and positive, but the pastor said, "God forgive, Jesus forgive," and I was all right. He forgives the soldier who comes back from war, despite his sins.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, it's a picture at that point, but I took it the first level at first, and I was like, "Wait, is it a sin to do hard things to protect others?" And that was my question. Does it become
Mm-hmm.
a sin still? Or like because the greater good is one thing, and the sins that we see in the book, the Bible, if you wish, are a total different thing,
Yeah.
right?
What you're digging so deep. Like there are so many levels of that, John. Like
Yeah.
there are like each one of those statements that you've just said about the history and how things are in society and does does God forgive sins, the sins of soldiers? Those are so deep. It would be near impossible to find an answer. But you and I share a bit of a similar story as far as religion goes because I was brought up in a Lutheran church. So for those that don't necessarily understand, Christianity is broken into Protestantism, which is anything that's not Catholic.
Yeah.
And Catholic Protestantism has various degrees of Christian faith, and they all basically are the same, but they differ in sort of their ceremonial ways and the way that they pray and the way that the ministers or the pastors will deliver a sermon. But generally speaking, they're all the belief system at its core is the same.
Mm-hmm.
So from 0 to the age of 18, I was like you, I was brought up in church. I went to church every Sunday. I was baptized. I was confirmed in the church, which is, to my recollection, is sort of a way of kind of proving that you're like a member, an adult member of the church.
Yep.
I had to go through Bible study.
Yep.
I was like an altar boy who would
Yeah.
I would collect the money and I would light candles and put the candles out and I would help with the communion. And I hated every minute of it. It's so weird too. I can remember when I was a kid going to bed at night and I would say the Lord's Prayer and then there was another little, remember the prayer like now well, in English it was, now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep, if I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. that scared the crap out of me, John. Like, I thought that if I didn't say that prayer and I died in my sleep, I would go to hell.
Yeah.
So at some point during my maturing years, growing up towards 18, I was so fed up with religion that I turned to atheism.
Okay.
And I just, like, I was done with religion. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I never had any kind of idea of what spiritual practice was or anything like that. So I felt like the way I was taught religion and how I was indoctrinated in it kind of ruined it for me. And at the same time, I was growing and I was really enjoying science. So I was questioning the validity of what I was hearing because of how it was taught to me.
Hmm.
Taught to me that the stories in the Bible were all literally true, which contradicted reality around me, or at least my perception of reality. So
Hmm.
um, it was a strange time because, and this is why I'm saying this and going on a bit of a tangent to try and sort of like peel back the layers of what you said.
Yeah.
There seems to be less and less religion in society, and what's happening? Society is crumbling,
Yeah.
right? And I think it was Friedrich Nietzsche a long time ago talked about, and then going back like more than 100 years ago, Nietzsche in one of his writings said God is dead, and then in that he's talking about how, on a philosophical level, he was talking about like we were overcoming our superstitions, but on a real level, I think that God is dead is proving to be very difficult for people because there's no greater ideal for people to look to now.
Hmm.
So then you see how ideology is creeping into society and people are grabbing onto all of these politically correct woke types of movements, and it may be that they're looking for something greater than them to fill a void, right? To
Yeah.
fill this thing that seems like humans have evolved in a cultural way to have, which is a desire for something greater than them.
There's, how can I say that? Um, when I said to my parents I was getting married, it was kind of
Yep.
the end of the world. Why do you have to do that? Um, and I mean, I was like, well, you send me to church, right? You should know better. You're the
Yep.
one who pushed me that into me, right? And truthfully, I got married because it was my wife's side of things, which is English tradition and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
Because she's not practicing at all whatsoever. Um, but that part was important for her, so may as well go for it. Um, Happy wife, happy life. But
Happy spouse,
seriously,
happy house.
yeah, exactly. Uh,
Sorry.
no, you're totally right. I heard that one. I love that one too. But I had to do the questioning. Why do I do this? Like, do I believe in this, and so on and so forth. Um, when and I mean, this is the funny part, right? Because what you said is interesting. Um, I was told at one point in my life that um, the religion is a crutches. It's what people can lean on when things
Hmm.
goes bad, right? And what I saw this weekend at church was not people who were feeling bad. Were people happy, man. They're
Yeah.
singing and they're shaking their hands and what, and there was a band of like they're probably between 20 to 30 years old singing the pray the Lord and whatnot. It was something that I never saw before, right? Like I never
Yep.
witnessed that joy because the Catholic side that I've seen for me was, we wear a white robe, with that little cord around your tummy and the cross, the wooden cross on your chest, and you say the words in Latin and so on and so forth. And I mean, I'm not old, right? So it's not that far away. Um, so witnessing this was a different kind of reality. Um, my parents have been together for now this year will be 40 years old. They got married after 35.
Right. And you
Eh,
you said this to me before privately
yeah,
that the French culture that you come from in Quebec, marriage is just not a real big thing. It's
yeah,
you're together, you don't need to be married, right? Just for the
no,
listeners, like I think is that correct? Kind of like
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
idea that your
What I
spouse is your
told you
spouse.
exactly is in Quebec we don't get married, we get divorced. That was what I said, and
Yeah.
you laughed at it. I remember that, um, and I think that this is where you can see the revolt against, the church itself, where, like I said, like my parents are in love, my dad still love my mom, like above and beyond, grabbing his little bum, and he's 70 years old and he's above and beyond, and it's beautiful to see.
Yep.
um and they didn't marry in front of a church. It was not even in front of a one of their friend got the fucking certificate to make them married, and it was all right. Did it done
Yep.
in the backyard, just family wise. And I don't know why. My dad told me, he's like, well, you got married, so we kind of have to follow, right? That was what he told me. So and there was abuse, right? Obviously there was abuse. We both know that throughout Canada. I mean, the church was part of the, getting rid of so many native, which is awful when you think about it.
Oh
And
yeah,
it,
big
it
time.
it is another like really FT subject. I know you are surrounded of reserve where you are at. I know here we have a bunch as well. And the year where they found those 1,200 dead body of those kids, close to uh, the reserve here on the highway, you had 200 whatever, I think 87 teddy bear on each side,
Mm.
right? It's like just the signification of the kids. I have never heard about that, right? Like I've never been like, was there a school in Quebec that was doing this? I don't even recall hearing about Quebec, because again, the religion, the relationship is different with Native and French versus whatever we heard about English and Native, right?
Yeah.
And that's another ball game that we can talk another day about.
Well,
But
that's why this is so complex. Like, I love talking about religion,
yeah,
and I'd like to keep this conversation going so we can get to like where we are now with it, John,
yeah,
because like you're touching on 10,000 issues, like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and when you said to me that we should have a pastor on, I thought, yeah, that is a really, and not just a pastor. Like, I think, and forgive my ignorance to anybody who's listening, I
Yeah.
would love to hear from somebody from the Jewish community, not just the
Sure.
Christian community, right?
Yeah,
And maybe an imam from the Islamic community,
I
because
would love that.
there's so much pressure, societal pressure, and media lambastement of all religions. It would be interesting to hear from them all at different times to see what they bring and what they have to say about community and society, and what's important and what isn't, and what's the truth in their eyes, and what isn't, right? Because we're all so inundated with religion that we don't know. It's just so
Mhm.
deep. There's so many avenues to it. But
But the religion in general, and I think yeah. So I think there's something. Let's go back on that religion aspect. But one thing that I want to talk to the priest or pastor or imam, or whatever it may be, is how can you keep faith when you witness so much darkness? And that's kind
yeah,
of what I faced in my own fate. Let's go with that, because
yeah,
like you, I was very interested into science and so on and so forth. I was looking into this, but I also look into the mythology aspect. And uh, all right. So I was interested into our religion itself, but I was so interested. I was interested into the mythology of the things. So
yeah,
why mythology? Because, well, if I want to buy a car, I'm going to compare everything, buy the best car, and
yep,
I'm going to compare the history of each brand and so on and so forth, and go with it. Um, and so when I started to look, and I was interested by Romans, I was interested by Greek, I was interested by Norse, and so on and so forth, which they all look a little bit the same, right?
yeah. A lot
In
of them have
some
similar
ways,
origin stories, or
yeah,
at least they're sort of pointing in the same direction. If you
they
if
all
if
have
that's an
one
easier way of
God,
saying it, yeah.
yeah, right. And I mean, we have one technically, but we have the Holy Spirit and
But that's
Jesus and whatnot.
but that's the most recent. That's only in the last 4,000 years, right? Before that,
Mhm.
everything was sort of pagan worship where there was numerous gods.
Yeah, well, but if you look at, let's say, the Greek, Zeus was still the top.
He was, but then there were demigods and gods below him, right?
Yeah. Now,
Yeah,
if you look into this for the fun of it, right, because we can talk about it, if you go 10,000 years back, there was an Anunnaki.
right. With
Okay.
the that wasn't the Sumerians, it was the ones
Yeah.
before the
Yeah.
Sumerians,
The
right?
Sumerians
Was it the
wrote
Sumerians?
Sumerians are the one who wrote about the Anunnaki. There's not like there's tablets that they found about them.
Yeah,
And now the Anunnaki was technically, and it differs in very many books, and don't quote me on everything here, but um, they would have come from, the sky
Yeah.
to the earth and whatnot and so on.
But
And
essentially gods to the Sumerians, right? Things that were
yes,
super powerful.
but now you have
Or
scientific who,
angels, or like even angels, right?
so you have scientific who look at this now, right? And they're like, wait, what if it's a ship bringing them to Earth?
Yeah.
Right, and that's where you get the UFOs or whatever you call that, like the specialists in that field, and so on and so forth. So it is very, very interesting. But can there be science and religion? And I think they can.
I think so.
Right.
Yeah.
I asked the same thing to my wife yesterday. I'm like, what do you believe in? And she told me, I don't know the term for it. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's brilliant. I'm in the same boat. I love what I've learned by all means. I like what it says in the book. It makes sense to me. Um, but the thoughts that I have for over 20 years was it all makes sense. It all, like, the philosophy around it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, which one is the real one? Can I mix the science to it? I think so. And so on and so forth. Does it change the tone at times with years? Yeah, it does. I mean, we've seen it with various things like, gay marriage and so on and so forth, which no problem. Again, I have no judgment for this. I don't care. Um, but they adapt and carry on. And you have then the other people who are and then you have also, like, the issue that we're gonna have race mixed to it because people are trying to divide, but it's again not the point of this podcast. What we're trying to look at is what we do with our fate. Does it remain? Does it go? Does it get injured? And that's
Well,
the biggest thing. The injury that your fate can get is not something you're necessarily aware of it,
yeah. It
right?
it really depends on well, you said the word, and it depends on your faith, and then also it depends on your belief system.
Yeah.
So when you said, are soldiers forgiven for the tasks that they do, for the job that they
This
do?
sense, yeah.
I immediately thought of the Bhagavad Gita, and I don't know if you've read it,
No.
but it's a very famous Hindu story, and it follows a soldier, a prince named Arjuna, and basically in the story, he's talking to the god Krishna,
Okay.
and that's one of the premises of the book is Arjuna knows that he has to go and the he has to destroy either his brother or his uncle in
Hmm.
order to retain power and make sure that the good power stays in place. And I'm probably butchering this. I've only read it once, but the basic premise is that God is speaking to Arjuna and saying, if you are doing the right thing, this is your purpose. If this is what you are meant to do,
Yep.
then it isn't a sin.
Yep.
So in that Hindu practice, God, not only is God the person that's speaking, who is Arjuna, Arjuna is also God. And this is actually more like his conscious that's
Okay.
speaking to him. When you read the book, and like I said, I'm ignorant to this, I'm very new to it, but it's beautiful
Yeah.
because it speaks to exactly what you're saying. And this is just in Hindu tradition. In Christianity, sins have to be forgiven. So perhaps in Christianity, it's like if you are tasked with being a soldier because that's your job and you are going out and you have to kill people, you have to ask God for forgiveness for these. And ultimately, in Christianity, Jesus was crucified in order to forgive the sins of mankind so that we could move forward
Yep.
in a rudimentary sort of way. There's a much deeper sense in that. So it really depends on what you believe. And
And it depends on which book you read.
well, yeah, because there's versions of the scriptures that have been rewritten, right? There's like the King James version of the
Yeah.
Bible, then there's like the new improved version of the Bible.
Yep.
There's the Bible that like there's the Torah, which is the Old Testament kind of,
Yep.
which is the Jewish Bible. Then there's the New Testament, which is the Christian part of Christianity, which is attached to the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Then there's the
There's the
Quran,
book.
which is the Islamic Bible, which is very similar because it's the same God, but they don't believe that Jesus was the actual prophet.
Mhm.
And then then there's a thousand other religions all speaking to something.
Yeah. And
And
there's the books that are not in. And this is personally what was very
yeah, there's the
interesting
text
to
that
me,
didn't make it into the Bible, right?
and the
Yeah.
the reason why. The book of Enoch, Enoch,
Hmm.
extremely interesting because they speak about, I mean, the picture that, the angel in the New Testament and so on, they're all good people, right? They're or entities,
Yeah.
right? Who are there to oversee, protect, and whatnot, right? And I mean, if you look in history, uh, again, don't quote me, but I think it's around the 300s, right? That angels started to have wings because they had no wings before. Um, Now, there are other books where they say that angels are actually soldier, and the archangel were the most powerful soldier. They were not
Mm,
kind. They were there to discipline humans,
interesting. Yeah. See,
right?
I don't know much about this story. So
I'll send you the book. You can read it.
yeah, cool.
But I mean, there's, and this is the point, right? Like, so the book has changed. The term and so on and so forth that has been used has been modified for generations and so on. Same as, we talked about suicide before. Suicide used to not be a sin
Yeah.
because it was a sacrifice to God, right? So things change and change with whatever the hell maybe that comes. Um, Another thing that I found very interesting, I'll put it that way because I mentioned that to someone else I was talking earlier. The word devil or demon was used while I was at church this weekend, which I never heard in a Catholic church before. And the
Yeah.
priest talked about over Christmas how the priest, the pastor, about how his Christmas time was with his family and so on, and that he learned some evil word or acronym over the Christmas time, and it was the MAP, right? The minor attracted person, and he's
Oh
like,
God.
"This
Don't
is."
let's not get started on that because that's disgusting stuff. But
But
yeah,
yeah, but I hear you out
it is the
there,
devil.
and that
It is
and
evil.
the train of thought that I was told by the person I talked to earlier was, um, the devil changed words so they're more accepted.
Mm,
Now we can link fate and reality that we have nowadays. I'm not saying that fate is not reality, but I'm gonna have a question for you.
sure.
If we look into, let's say, the 90s and the 2000, God, Jesus, who is not so involved into whatever arts and so on that we can see. It was probably there, but it was not so pushed. In the recent last 5 7 years, we have seen a wave of veneration, right? Like praising the devil, Satanism, and so on and so forth. I mean, we always had those people who are sometimes very charismatic who does it, right? Like Charles Manson is a good example. Um, but we have had, I think 2 years ago, they released, I think it was Nike, and don't come, it can be another brand, who had a pair of shoes, basketball shoes, where there was blood dropped in it,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
we have now stars, or not, I don't hate calling them stars, artists, musical artists who actually just promote that
Yeah. They're
as a
emulating
whole.
Satanist type of
Yeah.
symbolism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
why? I mean, I remember, like, Marilyn Manson, which was seen like a demon, right? Like in
Yeah.
the end of the 90s.
It was just that was just shock rock though. Like I
Yeah,
Marilyn Manson is a brilliant guy and he admitted it
exactly.
was shock rock, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he made not only a fortune, but he made his career out of it, right? Like the guy had breast and removed, like, ribs and so on and so forth, right? For whatever his reason is. And
That's probably
but
not real, but
yeah, I'm just showing, but I mean, in
no,
the same time,
that was the story, right? Like he
yeah,
was this Satanist worshiping thing, and his music was going to cause you to end up becoming a Satan worshiper yourself, which it
yeah,
wasn't because I kind of liked it in the '90s. But anyways,
yeah, same. I still listen to it. Anyways, but yeah,
so
it's
why Satan? Why is this happening? That's the question.
like, yeah, and what I see as well is you have a big community of people who have no beliefs,
Yeah. Okay.
right?
Well, here's my thoughts on it because I can use myself as a benchmark for why I think.
Okay.
So I told you that I lost my faith and I when I was 18, I was done. I was done church. My mom, you know, she was my caretaker and I loved her dearly. And she said, you have to go to church till you're 18 because then when you're 18, you're an adult and I can't order you to do anything anymore. Coincidentally, and I'm pretty sure this is true, my 18th birthday landed like right on a weekend or a Sunday. So that was it. I didn't go to church anymore.
Yeah.
And I turned very quickly to atheism. And you know what happened to me because I was atheist? I became arrogant.
Mm.
And I loved science, and science was talking about quantum mechanics and quantum physics and cosmology, and that the universe is infinite, and that things are smaller than we can ever imagine, and there's nowhere that God fits into these equations. And I started looking at the stories and thinking how ridiculous that, you know, God would send tablets down to Moses. How stupid to think that um, the religion Islam is now saying that there's another man who was the real prophet and it wasn't Jesus. And who's got any evidence that Jesus is real? And, you
Mm.
know, I was kind of fulfilling my own prophecies with my own bias and my own arrogance.
Mhm.
And for a very long time, I was like that. And I was actually quite rude about religion. I was outspoken against it. Um, it really affected some of my friendships. People knew that I was like that, and I was outspoken about it. And I absorbed a bunch of books written by a guy named Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Dan Dennett. These were like they were called the Four Horsemen. They were talking very openly about how religion was kind of quote stupid.
Mhm.
Now here I am in my mid 40s, and I'm turning back to God in my own way.
Mhm.
And then I look out on the world and I see how atheism, or at least agnosticism, which is sort of the fence sitters that are kind of like shrug their shoulders and say, meh, I don't need God. And with the uptick in atheism and agnosticism, we also see a massive rise in ideology and in the corrosion of our morals and
Yep.
our ethics
Yep.
and the disruption of the nuclear family and more people living single and divorce rates skyrocketing. And the list goes on and on. And there appears to be, at least circumstantially, a direct inverse correlation where as religion is depleted, ideology and social unrest is increasing.
Mhm.
So, what does that mean? Maybe there's something to it. You know, at the beginning of this, I said that there is a void left when you divorce yourself from God that seems to need to be filled, that most humans need something much greater and deeper than them to adhere to.
Mhm.
Now, way upstream of all that, John, is like, it is the universe dictated by some soul energy. And I mean soul like SOLE,
Yeah.
one energetic thing
Mhm.
that is the intelligence of everything. You know, when anybody talks about God, are we all are we all pointing our finger at the same thing, and then it's just human stupidity that's screwing it up with fairy tales and mythology and fantasy? And is that one of the problems, is that humans are getting in the way of actually the real actualization of what God is? So in Christianity, for sure, the Bible is so deeply complex as to probably not be understood by the layperson properly and would
Mhm.
require a real scholar to break it down for you to try and understand what it means. You know, when you hear stories about the Great Flood, well, there's actually some pretty good evidence that there was a massive flood on Earth a few times.
Yeah.
So there's probably some truth in that now. But but were they able to was Noah able to get two of every animal on a boat? I don't know. That's probably part of the story leading you to believe in something tangible, but not necessarily literally real, literally true, right?
Mhm.
It's metaphorical. And so there's examples of these metaphorical, analogous stories in the Christian Bible that probably are more like a lesson that you need to dissect and understand deep within you. That's pointing you to something like act like God and be virtuous like God, and things will be better in your life.
Yeah.
And when society turns to ideology, which is like written in the Bible, don't worship false gods,
Hmm.
you can see what happens. I mean, look at the political climate right now.
Hmm.
People are jumping on every single politically correct bandwagon, and it's creating division and sowing hatred among
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And they're void of their religious beliefs that used to hold people together in community. Like you said, that sensation when you go into church and you see people who are all smiling and singing the same song, and it seems cult-like if you think of it that way.
Yeah.
But if you look at it in a different light, it can be very beautiful.
Can be a family,
Yeah,
right?
and I've spoken about this many times. I was recently interviewed by Zach from the
Yeah.
Canadian podcast, and that was one of the things I said. He was asking about the police world and what's the big problem. I said community.
Yeah.
We're all missing community, and one of the things that used to bring us all together was church and religion,
Hmm.
and it was this deep sense of connection that everybody in the room, everybody in the church, or everybody that was gathered in the tribe had a belief and a deep sense of connection to something much greater than themselves. Whether or not that's real remains to be seen.
Hmm.
And then we can talk about both our personal thoughts on this, but that's my 2 cents on what I think is one of the big problems and why lost faith is such a problem in modern society. The uptick of atheism, agnosticism seems to give rise to idolatry and ideology and a corrosion of community.
Yeah. I think, and there's a difference between the institution and what the religion is, and it
Yeah,
goes for, I think, every type of religion, right?
absolutely.
uh, I mean, the Vatican, millions and billions of dollars,
Billions. They're so
millions or
wealthy.
trillions or whatever that is.
Who knows?
um, yeah, exactly. I mean, and we all know that they hidden stuff, and and so on and so forth. And there's a library that the Vatican has that nobody can access except the Pope, and so on and so forth. And why are you hiding something there, right?
Yeah.
um that's part of where personally it started to ask myself question. Like when I was younger, I'm like, why are we not looking at texts that are hidden there? What are we trying to hide? And it's gonna be a little fucking turnaround with what we sat with Dr. Megan. But if people knows the truth on everything, crisis may happen,
Yeah.
right? um it's like, as silly as it is, I've heard that in a documentary where they ask if God, Jesus, was white or black or brown or whatever that is. Who cares? It's not about the color of his skin or her skin, if she was a her or whatever that is. Maybe it's about the message that is passed.
Right.
Now, the picture I have behind me, this one, um, we all understand that one perfectly, right? The devil trying to pull you in. And that's the
Yeah.
image of PTSD, right? And I just realized that as we spoke, that's a big symbol of religion right there, because
Yeah.
we pictured it, right? And we even picture the devil on multiple facets. And if you look at a place like Germany, you have what we call Krampus, and that was one of the side of the wall. The other side of the wall has another belief, but Krampus was what they call the negative side of Santa Claus,
Mm.
right? But when you look at Krampus, he looks like a devil or demon or whatever you want to call that. The goat head, and walking on two legs and taking kids away and so on and so forth, right? So there's a demon aspect that. Now, if
Yeah.
we dig even further, just to because we were talking about demon and it started to get me thinking about stuff. Let's go to Peter Pan, and I'm not going on a tangent. You'll see where I'm getting at. Um,
You're not going to go on a tangent, John? Come on.
well, it's still about
You're the
religion
king
and
of
belief,
tangents.
faith. Um,
I'm teasing.
what's it? Tinkerbell? I have fake clochette because it's in French, but Tinkerbell and the mythology, Irish mythology, and so on and so forth. Um, the Tinkerbell was actually a demon that goes to our world, kidnap kids, and when it brings to their own world.
What was it called?
Re
Neverland?
I don't know that point,
Well,
but
in Peter
regain.
Pan, it was called Neverland, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah, yeah,
wasn't it?
it
Yeah.
was. But I mean, in the mythology, I don't know what it's called, but goes back to their universe and go get back their form and eat kids,
Oh,
which is
wonderful.
kind of interesting because what did she do? She took kids, brought them to Neverland, and kept them there,
Yeah.
right? So the picture of demon, devil, and so on and so forth has been there for a while, right?
Yeah.
Um, and if you look at it, I mean, I'll push it further than this. For the one who are born in the 2000s, like forget it. But in 1999, right at the end of the year, they released a movie called Antichrist with Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Because it was the end of the world, right?
I don't
Because they were
remember that
saying,
one.
yeah, I can probably pull it up and put it in underneath here, but
We'll add it to
it
the show notes.
for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it was Antichrist or something along this, because the 2000 would be technically the fail of the year, the electricity and all the communication and so on and so
Y2K.
forth. Yeah,
Y2K was going to
Y2K.
destroy everything. Yeah.
But it was still very present. In the same years, you had Seven, right, which was with Brad Pitt, which was
Yep.
pushing into sins.
The Seven Deadly
Um,
Sins. Great
yeah,
movie.
Stigma.
Another great movie.
It was a fantastic movie, and she
Yeah.
passed away, right, because it
Do
was
you remember
morphine.
that part where she's like, "Il messaggero es non importante"?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that freaked me out, man. That part of that show where she was like writing in blood or something on the wall, and she like the devil's voice came through her. Yeah,
Yeah. Or when
yeah.
she's in her bath and she gets up and now she
Was
have
that called
holes.
Stigmata?
Stigmata, yeah, but in French was
Stigmata. Yeah,
stigmating or something like this. Yeah. So
yeah,
stigmata. Um, and they got it right, right? That's the other aspect. The nails was here, never been here. That's something to change. Because you nail someone here,
he's gonna rip right off.
you nail here, you have two bones, right? So I don't know
Yeah.
when that changed or whatever happened with that. But
See, now we
uh
have like 75 hours of stuff we could talk about with all the things we're talking about here. We're gonna have to do like a whole series on religion.
oh yeah, and I think
Yeah,
it'd be good. I mean,
yeah,
again,
man, it's great.
it's from perspective to different perspective by all means. And but there's so much to talk because it's been in everything, right? It's
Yeah,
been sitting on in politics, like you said, but it's been deciding some economy as well, and so on and so forth, right? Um, and it's been part of wars. I mean, the Hundred Years' War was a religion war, um, right?
a
And
lot
the
of wars were fought over religion. A
yeah,
lot of people have died because of religious belief, and like when I said that it's people that are kind of screwing with the deeper aspects of religion, I really believe that.
yeah.
Um, there's there's a really important book I think a lot of people should read called The Immortality Key. Have you heard about this one?
No, but I'm taking notes right now.
Okay, I can send you. I have my copy out on loan somewhere, and I'll have to remember who has it. But The Immortality Key is written by an author named Brian Mirarescu, and this is another tangent line, but hear me out for a second.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
A long, long time ago, most religious beliefs were able to practice in harmony with one another.
Okay.
And ancient Christianity was a religion where everyone paid pilgrimage to a specific place, and they would go and they would drink of this psychedelic brew. And then their minds were opened up to God, and they no longer needed priests and the core religious doctrine. They would see God because of this psychedelic drink that they were offered.
Yeah.
And The Immortality Key took Brian Mirarescu like 10 years to write. And he dug super deep into the literature and into the science and the research and ended up coming across insurmountable evidence showing that ancient Christianity was a belief system where the parishioners, if you want to call them that back then, would actually travel. They would save up their entire life savings to take one trip to this specific place in Italy, I believe,
Okay.
just to drink this religious psychedelic drink, have a transcendental um, religious experience, be connected to God, and then for the rest of their days would be able to live in harmony with God.
Hmm.
It that book really started to get me back into my own personal religious belief system
Okay.
involving God. And it kind of helped me snap out of my atheism, which was, I think, poisoning me in some way. So, anybody who's listening and you have any, my mic is kind of cutting out on me here. Anybody who's listening and has any interest in this, The Immortality Key by Brian Marorescu is a fabulous read on ancient Christianity. And what I know about Christianity is that eventually a bunch of dudes realized that they could control people if they used religion in a certain way.
Hmm.
And I think they started to zap the beauty of religion away from people and started to use it as a mechanism of fear.
And
And then I
profit.
think, yeah, and for profit, of course. And then I think they weaponized the metaphorical and analogous stories that were beautifully written in cryptic ways in these texts
Hmm.
and sowed fear into people in order to sort of control them. And maybe that was a good thing when you had, new societies popping up and massive populations growing, and people were quite ignorant and we didn't know much about anything. We didn't even have science or germ theory or, basic math skills. So maybe at some time it was important, but now it seems like what everybody needs is a good dose of spirituality and religion where you recognize that you're connected to something that will never have a real answer other than, and this is going way, way, way upstream. And now we're on a tangent line. I'm the one right, talking tangentially
Bingo.
here. However, so upstream of all things, whether it's science or religion, is an answer that can't be answered, right?
Hmm.
Religion all points to some source that is the source of whatever the universe is, whatever eternity is, that you can't ever peek around, you can't see. So there, at some point, you have to take a leap of faith.
Yep.
Physicists can tell you that the smallest thing in the universe is a Planck spherical unit, which is something that's like 10 to the minus 43 centimeters, which is the smallest possible measurement that can be measured.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, what's it made out of? They say energy. Where'd the energy come from?
Yeah.
From a single source. Well, what's a single source?
Yeah.
God. Well, what's God? And you can just go around and around like this forever in ad infinitum until you're blue in the face. Eventually, I think eventually we all have to concede that the only answer is to have faith that there is some sort of eternal intelligence.
Hmm.
And what turns people off, sorry, I'm in a hotel room, I'm not in my studio here. What turns people off, I think, John, is that so many people think that Christianity or Islam or Judaism or the Hindu faith or Buddhism or anything is kind of like talking about this woo woo kind of silly stuff where you think of a bearded man sitting up in the clouds.
Yep.
And I think that's what tricked me when I was young, and that what gave me this little chip on my shoulder and made me a jerk atheist was I was taking I was in a very immature way taking these metaphors and analogies and trying to put them into a reality that defies and transcends the language and the understanding that we can put on it, unless you can look at it like this, like that God, excuse me, that God is something beyond what we explain as God, and that's the God I think that more people could swallow.
Hmm.
If you can accept that the particles the particles in your big toe are the same particles in the sun, that the galaxies, the trillions of galaxies in the known universe are all made up of the same stuff as your body,
Yep.
and that there's no border and there's no line between your skin and the air and everything else that you touch. It's all literal ripples of energy with frequency and vibration, and obviously there's an intelligence to it because we're all conscious and aware and we have this beautiful life in front of us. So the thing that makes us all aware and conscious and creates the universe, whatever that thing is, maybe that's what God is. And
Mhm.
I would love to hear, when you asked like, hey, we should put a priest or a minister or a pastor or something on, I was like, oh man, I could ask 1,000 questions about this. So there's my big rant on what I'm thinking on it. And I think that's one of the problems is that we've bastardized what God is to a point where we're all fighting over what story is real when the reality is if God is a thing, if God is something that transcends what humans can actually point to, then it's the same God.
Yeah. The thing that as of today I still don't understand, and by all means, it's not like I speak about religion every day, or I will get into I guess um, uh, discussion where we don't agree or whatnot. But the thing that I don't understand is, what does it change to a person if you don't believe in the same thing? Why why do we have to fight for someone who believe otherwise?
Yeah.
And I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't think that killing for 72 virgin or whatever that is a better idea, or you know what I mean. Like it doesn't make sense. Or kamikazes, in the Second World War when that happened, and so on and so forth. It it, it doesn't make sense for me.
No.
I have, like, if I'm stopping someone, and again, right, it's the what is good and what is bad, and technically, if you remove what is good and what is bad, they're just action. But fundamentally, we know what is good and what is bad. Is it because of the book that told us that we grew up as this is good and bad, or is it because you have values that you gather with times that show you what was good and bad?
Yeah.
And and I think it's a mix of both. You don't have to commit a murder to know it's wrong. You know what I mean? How many cops who have to pull the trigger, and they will pay the price for the rest of their life, not
Yeah.
because they're going to commit suicide, not because they're going to be, well, they will be investigated and so on and so forth, by all means, but because they're going to carry that moment in the back of their mind forever,
Yeah.
um, because they have to save themselves, someone, or whatever that is. It was a dire situation. Now, if you look at the book, though, this is a sin. But saving yourself, is it a sin or it's survival? Right.
Right.
uh so there's, if we look at the book, like you said, if we look at the book at the first layer, line by lines, it's a very black and white book.
Yeah.
But what is important in it, in my belief, it's in between the lines, right? And we could gather fantastic things from each one of those books. What I don't understand is the form of competition that they have,
Yeah. I agree
right?
with you. Yeah.
Why do we have such a competition? Why don't we gather? Like, there's good in Hinduism that we don't have in Catholic or Christianity, and so on and so forth, right? Like, there's good in each one of them, which is fantastic. But why do we have to fight in between us? Why do we have the need to say I'm right, you're wrong? Because if you're wrong, it doesn't change anything into my life,
Yeah.
right? My belief will remain the same. What I don't understand is, why do we have to fight to just prove our point? That blows my mind, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I'll go further than this. Like, is now, and that's a funny question, is now politic parties a form of religion?
Well, they act like one.
They act like one, and the people who are in it, um, I mean, the people we see on TV, because I don't think it's the majority of people. I think that those are an infinite small amount of people who speak too loud, and not for everyone. But the battle that we can see in the street, right? Like, you're wrong, I'm right, and blah blah blah. Why don't we leave each other alone and live in peacefully? Now, it doesn't remove the fact that life is hard. Life is supposed to have hardship and grow and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But if religion says, and I mean most of them says is the same thing, we need to accept each other. So why is it part this part, especially this part, is not pushed further. Because I know it is in Christianity, right? Like you need to forgive others, you need to accept as they are, blah 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 blah. Um, Now, I would believe, and I'm being quoted wrong, and someone who wants to comment on it, please do, but I would believe that it's the same in most religion, most of it. I'm fully aware that there's some that are not at all, right? And then they incite, they're pushing for violence for people who don't believe.
Yep.
But if we take a book black and white, might not get the best of it, might get
That's
some
right.
extremist out of it, right? I want to link another thing that you talked a bit earlier about Noah.
Yeah.
Now it's interesting because they believe that they have found the remains of the boat in a desert,
Yeah, and that's possible, right?
right? And it's a big thing, but in the same way, it's a big thing, but they don't want to talk about it
Yeah.
because that would prove some points, and then that would create some more crisis and whatnot, yada yada. Um, like you said, is that is it a picture that they took, two animals of each and so on and so forth? It has been proven as well that the Earth flips their poles, right? Once every
Hmm.
couple thousands of years, which would answer the question why we had a flood, right? Now we can also look into those big tsunami that happens when the tectonic plates are hitting each other in the middle of the ocean. The ripple effect is huge, is humongous. Lucky enough, we're in Canada where it doesn't happen that much, but there's other place where it does.
Yeah.
Um, which would answer easily, well, this is just a nature effect, right? But like you said, but where is it coming from, and where is it coming from, and the term will come back to the same. Is it God, is it gods, or whatever the hell may be? Sometimes we don't have an answer, and I think people needs, like, science got so far, right, out, that people need to have an answer black and white on paper that makes sense, that is
Yeah.
factual, it's irrefutable. Um, and that's a big word for a French guy. See, huh?
Yeah, you did well on that one. Good job,
Because
bud.
it's a French word. That's why.
Ah,
So I just said it with an English accent. But the point that I'm seeing here is sometimes, like, why do we see, like, let's say, good action that happened, right? Like a lady who crosses the street, someone's gonna stop their life to just help her go across the street, right? For
yeah.
safety aspect. Beautiful gesture. Do we need to know why that person did help? No, it's just beautiful.
That's right.
Sometimes fate is the answer.
Yeah.
Sometimes fate, it's why me? Why this? Why does it happen to me? Well, it happens because action, reaction, and so on and so forth. But maybe because you have to go through it, right? We have
Hmm.
a friend who today made the choice um, removing part of his leg,
Yeah.
right? Um, and it was his choice. Why this man had to go through this? That was the first question I asked myself when I saw that.
Yeah.
That was not his reaction when he wrote it though, about it. And I was like, again, once again, this man, I have to say, I freaking read the text and I'm like, how can you think that way? Right? How can you be still filled of gratitude
Yeah.
when you have a big, deck of cards that's been dealt that way? Um, and that's amazing. But that, to me, it's not just black and white thinking. Gratitude is not a black and white science base. Gratitude is, you need to be grateful for life in general. And when we talk
Yeah.
about life, what is life? It is not a black and white aspect. It is not a science base, right? You are not born into this family that you have for any like reasons, right? You have been put there for a reason. And there's fables right, left, and center. And I love those because I tell them to my kids because it was told to me when I was a kid. Same as that little, finger place here. I don't know if you ever heard about this one, right?
Nope.
Where and this one will be that you know everything when you're in the when your mother is pregnant of yourself until you're about to come out and an angel come and tell you to keep silence,
Oh,
right?
interesting. That's what that little depression by your lip is then.
Yeah, and
It's an
that's
it's
what
an
they
angel's
say.
fingerprint. Okay.
There we go, right? And it can
Yeah.
be, and we both smile because we're like, yeah, right. The freaking angel goes
Well,
and tell me, but
yeah.
there's things that we still cannot explain as of today. How the damn pyramids has been formed, funny as hell. Nobody
Yeah.
knows. Nobody can explain it. And why is there six pyramids set up the same way across the world?
Well,
Nobody
there's way
knows.
more than six now. They've found how
Well,
many? Dozens.
yeah,
There's dozens of pyramids on planet Earth. You,
yeah.
I like what you said about you got to read between the lines of religion, and I think that's one of the key takeaways for what is wrong. A couple things that I was thinking. You can blend religion and science
Hmm.
together
Yeah.
because I've written this a few times. I think the physicist and the shaman are both saying the same thing.
Hmm.
It's all just energy. And reading between the lines is what I'm saying when I'm talking about when you read the Bible black and white, that's where you can see the trouble starting to arise because there's things about in the Bible about slavery and homosexuality, and it interpreted the right way, very powerful, and also very evil.
Hmm.
So it's a dangerous game to be played if you're not a scholar and you can't understand the cryptic messages that probably very brilliant people were writing about a way to be present and aware and mindful in a universe that is a mystery.
Hmm.
Number two, human beings by our natural way are very impatient. We want answers like right now. So imagine our very early ancestors experiencing lightning
Yep.
and then creating a god for lightning and everything else that was happening. They were sacrificing humans to try and ward off famine, which because there was dry seasons, which was just a climate thing. But that doesn't mean that God isn't built into that. It just means that we think God is the machine that saves us.
Hmm.
You know, take the Super Bowl. It's one of the most watched sports games every year.
Yep.
So let's imagine that 500 million people are, and that's an arbitrary number.
Yep.
Let's say 500 million people are split down the middle for one team and the other. So 250 million people for each team. And based on stats, more than half of those people are going to be religious.
Hmm.
And most of them in North America are going to be Christian of some kind. So why does God decide to believe in the prayers of the one team instead of the other?
Hmm.
Because people are like, God, you hear all the athletes, I just want to thank God for the win. Why are you in better favor with God than Tom Brady?
Yep.
Right? I
Because
just
he
don't
won
think
enough
that.
of them.
Yeah, okay, well, that's a bad example because he's like the greatest quarterback of all time, even if you don't like him. What I'm getting at is I don't personally think God works this way. I think that the energy of the universe works better than believing that there's an actual real. I say the word real not in the sense
False
like
and
it's
realistic.
imaginary.
Yep.
I say that when you pray, I think you're praying to the energy of God. And in doing so, you're filling yourself with hope, which is also God,
Hmm.
right? And that's I'm going to go back to the problem. You're asking all these questions is why? Why do we fight each other? Because we all want the right answer because we're all well, and you can get into like the idea of death and what the religion is really built on death. It's built about around death and where do we go when we die because we're all afraid. But now that we're conscious about it, now that we're fully aware of our mortality, unlike a lot of other animals, we don't think that they are aware of their mortality. We are. We know our life is finite. And it's crazy scary for a lot of people to think that when the light goes off, that's it.
Hmm.
No more life. And wouldn't it be better if you believed that death is not the final thing, that heaven is where you go and you're reunited with family and it's this eternally blissful thing? Well, eternity is forever. You can't even fathom what that is. And what do you mean you're going to be in bliss for eternity? And so the questions abound as to what is going on when we're talking about all these things. And I think it's just that humans are really difficult. It's really difficult for us to wrap our heads around it. So yeah, why do we war within each other on whether what our beliefs are?
Hmm.
It's, it's because it's the greatest thing we can think of. There's no greater thought than what is God and where do we go when we die. So you'd think that people would really cherish those ideas and would necessarily sow hatred towards another person who is damning their God and
Yeah.
saying you are categorically wrong, right? Um, I don't know if my belief in God is right, that God is simply this intelligent perspective that we all kind of have and share. That's more of a spiritual thing that I tend to lean upon based on my own personal experiences. That it may be that the universe itself is the God,
Yeah.
and that we are experience that consciousness is this way of the universe experiencing itself. And that's not my original thought. It's something that I somewhat adhere to, and when I pray, and when I pray to God, I don't imagine a gray bearded dude in a robe up in the clouds. I don't imagine a Zeus kind of thing, or a Buddha type of god, or an eight-armed, elephant-headed type kind of god. There's various
Yeah.
gods with eyeballs all around their heads, and there's all kinds of various ways of picturing God. I don't picture God that way. I think of God as the source of all energy.
Yep.
So I just want to read something I wrote down. I got to hold my mic and my phone at the same time, so I'm going to just move here. Our guest had this on his Instagram, and I was going to ask him about it.
Oh,
So
really?
I'm just going to say it since we're talking about religion. I want you to comment on it and see where we go. And then we're getting into an hour here, but whatever.
Already. Wow.
Yeah, well, that's cool, man. This is a cool conversation. This is a quote by the philosopher Carl Jung, who
Oh, yeah.
even though he was a great philosopher, he still had a deep belief in God in his own way.
Yeah. And he
And this
heard
is
voice before he died. That's another conversation, but yeah.
yeah. So this was from the Instagram page of the um, guest we were going to have, and I won't name the guest yet because we'll have him on another time.
Yeah.
But here's the quote from Carl Jung: "Cold or not, God is still present. Invited or not, God is still present. Called or uncalled, God is still present." And to me, that speaks very beautifully as to what God is. God is just
Yeah. Everywhere.
everything and everywhere. And what are your thoughts on that after my 15-minute tirade?
I'm with you with this because saying he's everywhere doesn't say he's this and that identity or entity. He's not, beard, robe, person, elephant, whatever it may be. Um, it's just there, which brings as well the energy, the universe energy you talked about, as a full loop, and that makes sense to me. That I can sleep with. Um, I'm gonna push it in a different way uh, as well, and I'm visiting plant medicine with that. Let's go with that. Because I have a big interest into Mother Ayahuasca. Yeah, Ayahuasca. I cannot say that properly.
You're
Um,
getting good at it though. That's
I'm
way better.
practicing,
Yeah,
man, 3 times a day. I'm
good.
trying hard.
Yeah, in the
Um,
mirror. Yeah.
yeah, in the mirror with confidence. Uh,
Ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca.
There, you did it.
Um,
Good.
Now we are in the world, and I mean, South America has been, colonized by Portuguese and Spaniard, um, which are most of them Catholic, Christian, and so on and so forth. Obviously, there's tribes who had their own belief, but when you go South America, you see a mix of both,
Hmm.
which is extremely interesting. And I'm gonna go with the mother Hayahuasca, where I mean it's a total different belief, and you have people around the world who are going to places in South America for that ritual,
Yeah.
which is very very interesting to see and hear and talk about. Um, I will link it up to the time I spend in Brazil at night, in specific area of the town where I live, which was Rosario do Sul. Um, you had chicken burning on a stick, and beside it, you had the head of a chicken on the top of the stick, on a different stick. And what
Yeah.
I was told is if you look at it, it's bad luck. And I was like, why is it for? We cannot talk about it. And those people, I mean, the church is packed every damn time they have masses. Um, so they fully mix believe like this, right? Which we can call pagan, or tribes, or whatever, cult, and whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
But with the nowadays religion, which makes it very interesting. And I've not heard about a fight in between them. I
Mm-hmm.
have not heard about that. And obviously, you can go to Africa, where there's, again, in the continent, there's different belief, and so on and so forth, right? Because there's tribe that have not been in touch yet with technology, right? That they're forced to be left alone for XYZ reason, and for them to remain who they are. Now, when we talked to Damien in a previous podcast, how he explained to us how he got there was an adventure on itself, right? Fly
Yeah.
here, then a ride in a car of 2 hours, and then on the Amazon in a shitty boat for another couple hour or so, and then you get to a place where there's nothing,
Yeah.
and it's a tribe, and they live, and they have been living the same way for years on, hundreds of years, right? Because he was talking about two-person who were doing the same job, and I think it was two women, shaman, or whatever we're gonna call that. Um, so, is it possible to have both together existing? Yes. Is
Yeah.
it
I think so.
possible to grow out of it? Yes. And I mean that's kind of why religion changed, right? With the years, and so on and so forth. Um, is it getting better or worse? That I don't know. I cannot speak about it. But I really love and appreciate that God is there, as in general. And I say God not to necessarily Christianity or whatever the hell may be. God as a energy. I don't want to say spirit, because I don't think it's the case. There is an energy. There is people that you will see, they will go pray, or they will ask for communion, or they will ask for forgiveness of their sin, and they do feel lighter after the fact,
Oh
right?
gosh, yeah. Yeah.
um and is it because you have an inner peace that you create by saying, this is what I've done, I want to forgive myself, and so on? Or is it because there's a higher power energy that tells you you're forgiven, right? You have countless interaction where you have kids who are 2 3 years old, who are talking about area places where they lived in the previous life,
Yeah.
which is nobody can explain again. So, okay, well, reincarnation as one. And there's some people who died for X amount of minutes and came back to a world, and they say, well, I was somewhere else. Now, most of people will say, well, they're just trying to get attention, and from so on and so forth. And then they say the same about kids, but how come a kids of 2 3 years old can explain that? Now, nobody
Mm-hmm.
knows. So sometimes it's not about so much the black and white answer we seek for, but what can we, without touching, because we're not talking about Saint Thomas, but we're talking about touching internally. There's something
That's the
inside of
key.
you, a strength, a force, whatever you want to call it, where it tells you, no, I should not do that.
Yeah.
No, yes, I should do that. Or morally, for me, that doesn't make sense. Meanwhile, for someone else, might be, because they have to do it, because whatever. I think that we're responsible for our action. Now, I want to make that clear. I don't believe that God asked me to do such thing, because I'm sure you've seen some of them in the policing world. I've seen it. Well,
No,
oh,
you
God
turn
told
the
me to do.
TV on or social media, all kinds of people say that,
Yeah,
God told me to do this, right?
yeah. And
And
responsibility is another issue that we can speak on in a full on another podcast. But
yeah.
um,
Mhm.
uh, but but I love the term about the energy, and I think it does make sense, because also on the same aspect of energy, there's some energy from other people you will click and get attracted from, and there's some others that you will not, and
Yeah.
that's totally okay, fine as well, right? There's some conversation we can have that I guarantee you that with other people you could not have, and vice versa. So energy is something that is not palpable, but it's something that exists. um, and so on and so forth, right? Same as I mean, you go as police officer. There's people you couldn't be on, as same as you couldn't be on a partnership in a car, because 12 hours in the same car with someone you don't like during crisis is a
Hmm.
damn long time. But if you have the person with the right energy that match yours, it's like a relationship. And I
Yeah.
think religion should be seen as such a thing. It's a relationship you have with a higher being energy that you cannot necessarily explain, and that's okay. And I mean, obviously this podcast will not probably please everyone, because some people definitely don't want to hear about the religion. Some people do, and some people will just not agree with what we're saying.
Yeah,
um
and that's okay.
and that's totally fine. And I mean, if you have comments, constructive or not, please do share, um because that's how we grow as a
Absolutely.
community. I mean, I would be more than happy to have a debate, healthy one, um, versus belief, because I personally don't know everything clearly, and you don't know everything, and we've been fed a certain amount of knowledge in life, and we're gathering more, and that's kind of what we do over here, right? We're
Yeah.
sharing knowledge and experience in life, and views, personal views. Um, and facts. I mean, what we talked about, nowadays we're seeing religion, or a wave of like talking about the devil so strongly. Um, I think we should do one eventually about cancel culture as well. That'd be very interesting, right?
Oh
Because
gosh, yeah. That would go
it's
along with censorship.
oh, it would totally,
Yeah.
and it'd be very interesting, because there's, let's say we talk about church right now. There's people in the world of Hollywood who strongly believe in their religion, and they're being banned for it,
Hmm.
right? Because they will not, like, I know one of the actors will not kiss, and I don't have the name of that person, but will not accept to kiss any other woman than his wife. He's like, my religion doesn't freaking blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I respect that. I have no issue. But he got shunned for I think a decade because of this, right? Which is very very interesting. Why do we have a I mean, I won't say it's a generation, because it's not true. It's not the entire group of people. We have groups who are saying you cannot do that, right? It doesn't look good. And
Yeah.
now it's not even the establishment of the religion. It's actually groups who oversee. So, uh, I mean, religion can be seen as well as something else than what we know as Christianity, or Jewish, or whatever that is, right? Religion can be seen as well as how you work at work. We like, there's that expression where people say they work religiously,
Yeah.
and that exists, and we've seen those, and it doesn't mean that they're necessarily a workaholic people, but they're a way of they have towards work, or towards their type of life, that is totally different. um I mean, I've always been very curious about the strong belief that we have. They're German cult, that's not called, but group of people who lives without electricity. They drive
Like the
their
Amish.
horse. Yes, them. I mean, I'd love to understand how that works, right? I'm curious
Yeah.
about this, because it's totally different.
It's a it's
As
it's another form of belief, you know. It's
Yeah,
yeah, and um I don't know much about this. So
yeah, me
this is
neither.
just intuition and what I've gathered over many years. I had a deep passion for learning about religion for a long time, especially when I was an atheist. I thought I should know what I'm talking about. So I read the Bible from front to back, and I read the Quran, and it took me a year to read the Bible because it's a huge book and it's so much there's so much words in it. And I didn't read like a full version of the Quran. I read like a Cole's Notes version of it, which probably didn't do me any justice. But I really think that it's humans that screw religion up.
Hmm.
If God, whatever that is able to speak to humans through the universe, I don't think we're getting the message. I don't think we're getting the
No,
message clearly enough.
yeah,
And it seems like there's been people who have popped up in humanity that are ultra brilliant, genius level people. And some of them use that genius level mind, that way of seeing the world a certain way, like Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitive that he was a real walking human being. History was written around him. Now, the debate will rage on in Christianity and other beliefs that whether or not he actually like rose from the dead and ascended into heaven and descended into hell, like, upon his death, and then they roll the rock away from the tomb and he's gone.
Yep. Yep.
Who cares? That's all human problems. The fact remains that Jesus was, by all accounts, a real saint, a person who was pushing for the utmost in humanity and acting everybody to be as divine as possible and to celebrate what he thought was the word of God, which was
Yep.
this message to be good to each other and to live in harmony and to do no harm and to, all of the, most people know all of the various lessons that surround Jesus and his story. And then people come along and they screw with that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I want to finish this off at the end by just asking you a question, and I'm sure you'll get the answer. But what is the common denominator of all religions? God,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
So, are is it just our fairy tale, our very poor fairy tale telling that's screwing up what religion is? Is it just is it all just the banter, the fluff that fills in between human and God that's getting in the way?
I would say yes.
I don't know. I mean, it sounds like on its face, yeah, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I don't know if the stories in the Bible are, in fact, genuinely real and not mythology and analogy.
Okay. I think I think to let's say we take to a first level, right? The first thing is it the human who the man destroying the genuine part of, and again, it's not everyone. I'm talking about like higher, powerful group of people who use it for their own means,
Hmm.
right? Was told back home where I was raised that the Catholic is the biggest mafia that has ever existed in the world, right?
Yeah, it depends on the
Um,
conspiracy theory you believe, right?
and exactly right, and but there was proven as well that there's they had assassins and their murders and whatnot, and they're old things, right? So there's a lot of
Yeah.
story we can visit that is not in the Bible. Let's go with that. But if you look at the story and you look at the message, um, there's something genuine there, and that's the genuine part that you have to take away from. That's the part you're supposed to take from that book. Um, More than anything, that's my personal view. Um, and it's there's a form of values, there's a form of way of living, and so on and so forth. I mean, they were saying that right now we're supposed to be, if you look at Christianity right now, we're supposed to be fasting, a week of fasting or something like this, which I'm not doing. I mean, I love eating, and I have two kids, and if I'm cooking, I'm cooking for everyone. Um,
Yeah.
but and that's in the book. It's a black and white thing, right? But that's not what I'm interested personally in. I'm interested into that in between the lines. And
Yeah, I
what you
like that.
said is great, right? Be good to each other. It's a simple message. Let's be good to each other.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have issue with that.
Yeah.
Have
Well,
issue to do that.
100%, John. Uh, we got to get a pastor on and an
Yep.
imam and a Jewish. Oh man, I'm so sorry that I don't know the term for a minister in the Jewish community, but I just
Rabbin.
want to.
I know in French it's rabbin. It's, I don't know in
Yeah,
English. I would have to look.
but you're so right. It's being good to each other. The magic of life is such that it should be cherished to the highest degree.
Mhm.
And this is how I want to end this religious talk, because you sparked it in me with your last couple comments. Maybe that's the essence of God. We have an infinite universe. By all accounts, scientifically, the universe is infinite or eternal, if you will.
Mhm.
Maybe there is a border. Who knows? I don't think we can ever know. But let's just, for the conversation's sake, think that the universe is eternal.
Yep.
We also know that the universe is intelligent because there's intelligence everywhere.
Mhm.
And we also know that as a result of the universe, we are here.
Yep.
And you might be nihilistic. Some people might be nihilistic and hate the idea that humans are the smartest thing out here right now, and you could talk about aliens and whatever. But for us as people, this is the life we get, and it's finite. So maybe thinking on that would be a good way to enlighten yourself on what God is,
Mhm.
the celebration of the magic of life through the intelligence of a universe that came from a single source, which is the definition of God. And at an hour and 25, if you've made it this far, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
This is controversial. We welcome all comments on this. This is opinion, right? John and I are not scholars or experts. But it was a good one, John. Thanks. This was a fun talk.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being there. Please subscribe, like, thumbs up, comment. I mean, we want to interact with you. And the
Yes.
good news is coming is we'll be doing a live as well episode weekly soon enough. We're gonna start, and we hope to actually interact with you guys and
Yeah.
gals, because we're doing this for the fun of it. We're doing this to share opinions, views, and so on and so forth, and wisdom. When it comes to have wisdom, there's not always wisdom, but
Mhm.
sometimes. So it's been a pleasure, man. Thanks for I mean, link it up, because I mean you're away from home right now. I
Yep.
appreciate that, and see you next time, my friend.
Peace.